Hello, everyone. My name is Perez-Carreno, and welcome to the Web Talk Show. Today with us is Paul Nunn from Paul Nunn Training. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So, Paul, for those listening who don't know you, could you give us a brief intro into who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to. I live here in the Houston, Texas area. I am I guess, a sales and leadership coach expert. I I train mostly community banks and credit unions, but I think what we talk about and what I teach is industry agnostic, as I like to say. But what I primarily do is I teach leaders, managers, how to coach their teams so they can be more successful. And I also teach sales skills and anything that has to do with I've got to deal with another person, whether it's a customer, an employee, a direct report, even a superior. And I've been doing that on my own now for about 2.5 years, and it's been a roller coaster of clients, no clients, and just traveling all over the country. But it's been a blessing. It's a lot of fun. It really is. I give everything I have. It's just a lot of fun, and I love teaching managers. They're hungry for it. A lot of managers were kind of thrown into the fold, not with a whole lot of experience, saying, "Here you go, you're a manager. Good luck." And you usually don't get a whole lot of feedback on how to actually do that. So it's been a lot of fun.
I'm glad you talk about that part because it was mentioned in another of our shows in the whole training space that precisely what you just said, people get thrown into these roles many times and there's no real safety net for them. And so someone coming in and helping train on that aspect is fantastic. How did you get started with community banks and credit unions? Like, we can talk about niches.
Yeah.
Everyone says pick a niche, but like, why that niche?
Actually, I get that question almost everywhere I go because I started out as a middle school band director. I taught band in the Houston area for 10 years. And so when people hear that, they're like, how in the world did you move from being a teacher to being, a sales coach or leadership coach? What happened was, of course, teachers make exuberant amounts of money. We've got three or four homes all over the world. But I supplemented my income being a bank teller here in the Houston area at both a bank and at a credit union. So I did that for several years up until my daughter was born. And I just realized that I really loved working with customers or members, depending if you're a bank or a credit union. But I loved that interaction, but I also loved teaching. So, really, in 2003, a former manager called me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, we really don't have much in the form of training for our new hires." And I knew that because I didn't have that training
Hmm.
when I started in banking. So I got a chance to just build some training from the ground up. And gosh, that's been what, 20 some odd years. That's just been so much fun. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth into training, was moving from teaching straight into banking and never looked back.
Nice. Now, the great thing about this story is that it's not only that you started with that, but
Hmm.
that you actually started even lower at the
Yeah.
teller level, seeing and having that experience where the
Right.
training was not there. And
Right.
so you got your hands dirty in the whole process and then eventually got into the training part, which is great because you had the knowledge and the the hard work
Yeah.
behind it to know what actually happened at that level instead of being an up down type
Right.
approach.
Yeah, I love going into talking with groups, especially managers, and I'll say, how many of you were never trained as whether it's a teller or even as a manager? And it's not a knock to the industry. It's just, I would say, I probably say a lot of the listeners that remember a job where they were never trained and they were just thrown in and said, good luck. Even with teaching, my first year teaching, I was not prepared. I am more comfortable speaking to you, to your viewers, and to a 400 member audience of executives than being in front of 25 eighth and ninth graders. That would strike the fear into anyone. And that was much harder. So I totally get it. Now, you said something, Armando, just now about kind of lower about the teller. I'm going to pick on you just a little bit because when I teach these skills like sales skills or leadership skills, we always talk about the teller being the entry point, and I kind of get on the soapbox about the fact that they're actually, if you look at an org chart, you should actually flip it because the face of a bank, credit union, really any industry, whoever answers that phone, that's the face that you need to work on. So I tell managers all the time, it's like, um, you've got the employees that see the most customers. You've got the employees that have the most amount to lose because they're got to look for fraud, they got to look for compliance, they got to balance, whatever. But they've got all these pressures, but yet they're the least trained and they're paid the least.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we talk about with leadership training is like you got to pay your people. We always get into that. You want to motivate employees. You got to pay them and treat them well and give them what they need. So there you go. Off my soapbox.
That's an excellent point. I appreciate you bringing it up because
You bet.
there is a disconnect at the end of
Hmm.
the day between, and like you said, it happens in all levels, in all businesses, in all markets, in all industries, and that's that phase. Nobody knows what the CEO looks like or
Yeah.
the VPs. They're over there somewhere. In some
Right.
cases, yeah, there's spectacular people that are out there exposing their brand, building brand as them. But in many scenarios, the business, you don't really see those people who are making the most and who are getting all the training and all the expensive treatment. Whereas, like in this case, bank tellers, if you don't give them the treatment they deserve, they are the ones that people are actually interacting with, like
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
said. And you can see it as a customer. You'll
Hmm.
go and you'll hear these people. They might be exhausted, they might be tired, they
Yeah.
might even be having a bad day, and you're there and maybe you have a bad day, so then you have a bad
Hmm.
experience, and so you leave the bank and
Right.
you go
Right.
somewhere else.
And
And
nowadays, you're in San Antonio, right? Okay, so we know what Bucky's is here in Texas, and I know it's
mhm,
it's spreading. But they advertise how much they're paying their employees right there. And when you walk into this glory, I'm
mhm,
not
the
going to say
window.
convenience store. For those of you who've never been to a Bucky's, I am not going to demean the name of Bucky's by saying it's a convenience store or gas station. It is an icon. So they advertise how much they pay, and so we're not competing with people in our industry. These frontline employees are competing with Bucky's, with McDonald's, with anyone, or really working for themselves now after the pandemic. So you're absolutely right. We've got the people that are trained the most have the least amount of time with customers. And I will even tell you this: if there's a problem, the front line, whoever that is, whatever industry you're in, you're the easiest to you can fix the problem so quickly.
Mhm,
That's why customer service skills and sales skills, they're one and the same. You can deal with problems at the front line. They don't have to go to a senior leader.
mhm.
And that's why it's so important to train. And that's why I love what I do. I train these frontline employees, you know, take care of these customers. So anyone that's listening, if you're in the front line, take care of those customers. Take care of those customers because your CEOs, your senior leaders, they're not going to have the time. They're too busy, and it just runs more efficiently that way.
That's amazing. We were talking about something similar with Keith in another of our shows.
Yeah.
It's a funny name show because grease fires are no joke. I think we called
Yeah,
it.
I saw that one. I loved it. I loved
It's
it.
a fun episode,
Yeah, it
especially
is.
because when I reached out to Keith, I was looking at different training businesses,
Hmm.
and this one was so different and out of
Hmm.
the box. For those listening who haven't listened to that episode, they train people on commercial kitchen hood exhaust cleaning,
I know.
which is that is really niche down, but it's a big thing. Like they have a campus, and
Are
it's
you serious? That's right. That's
yes,
right. See, I used to work in college. I
uh-huh.
worked in a kitchen. When they talk about grease fires, you're right. The vents in the commercial kitchens, that
Mm-hmm.
stuff is nasty.
Mm-hmm.
That
And
stuff
we
is
were
nasty and it can easily catch fire. I
They
get it.
can. They
Yeah.
can. And so yeah, if you're curious about that, listen to that episode. Very exciting, very interesting to know how all that works. And one of the things we're touching on is trades. So I'm very fond of tradespeople, whether it be an electrician, a plumber, a painter, whoever you want, they do such a good job. Many times in extreme heat, extreme cold, they had to train here, at least in the States, they had to train a lot and for their skill, they have to get certified, they have to pass all these tests to be able to do it. But then they don't have the treatment that a lot of, let's say, different level jobs have, professional, whatever you want to call them. And so they don't get the comfort of the office and they don't get a lot of these other comforts. And so they don't have the structure. And so we see a lot of them struggling and a lot of them do extremely well. But some you can see they're good, they're humble people, they are genuine, they do great work, but you see them struggling with the business side of things because they never
Yeah,
got the business training.
right,
Right. And again, these are people who are actually doing the work and working with the customer. And so, what you're saying and the things you do, I think it's so important that people realize this. If you run a company like this where you have tradespeople working for you or with you, it's so important to train them and not only in the skill, right?
right, right. I noticed that we got a new air conditioner, which of course in Texas you got to have one if you're gonna not die in the heat
Hmm.
during the summers. The guy was so nice, but we talked about that how these electricians or these HVAC folks that come out there, they've also got to know these sales skills and these training skills because you can easily work on someone's AC and just by having a conversation, just by asking good questions, you give them the training they need. You're looking at building relationships and maybe extending a warranty and things like that. So I think training is hugely needed. Not, and you're right, not just in corporate America or white collar, if you will, but anywhere. Anytime you're working with a customer or with the public, you got to know how to talk to people.
I really like the fact that you worked with band middle
Hmm.
and high school.
Yeah,
How would you say it's funny because in another episode we also talked about how one of our guests had an upbringing in theater
yeah.
and now he coaches and trains in his
Hmm.
company presidents and vice presidents and
Really?
yeah, oligarchs. And so it's very interesting. I find the connection with art and music. Before offline we were talking about the art that you have behind you
Yeah, yeah.
and having all these different aspects of not only the work but having a creative outlet as well can really help. So
Right.
in your case, do you think having had that experience with kids and band and music and art, does that help you in any way with what you do and how you interact with people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember in college, we had to learn how to perform and how to perform under pressure. And I remember one of my private teachers, it was warm, definitely. And he said he had all of us put on real thick sweaters, like two sweaters, and run in place for 45 seconds to get out of breath. And then he says, okay, now play the piece of music that you're about to play on stage. So he had us recreate the nerves and the out of breath of performing in front of someone else. And, that was a long time ago. And I still remember that because you still get nervous. And anytime you perform, anytime you're in front of, like even before us calling you today, I was a little nervous. I was like, okay, does everything look good? Got my shirt on and all that, and got it ironed. And everyone gets nervous still. Everyone does. And in fact, I was coaching a manager one on one with her, and she was kind of more of an introvert, and she is about to be on a at a conference, and she's going to be one of the kind of a roundtable speakers. Very nervous, and one of the things I told her was talk to people that have been on stage before, and she said they said the same thing. Everyone still gets nervous. So when you get taught how to be nervous and still do it anyway, that was huge. So get in front of those kids, like I said, was a large group of banker CEOs is nothing compared to give me 25 or 50 middle schoolers any day. Yeah, I'm good.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I when I was in college, I was musical director and we would have these performances and it
Hmm.
would be 1,500, 1,600 people on the
Yeah.
stage and it was fine. I enjoyed it a lot. You always get a little bit nervous, make sure you have the songs ready, you have everything in place like you're just saying, even if you're doing it every day for a few days or a weekend or any
And
season.
it's their first time seeing it. That's the thing too. It's like you may be
Yes.
doing this it's their first time. The audience and
Hmm.
yeah, keep going.
And it's I think something there's two sides to my point. One is I think it's necessary and beautiful, the fact
Hmm.
that you get nervous. So if you don't
Yeah,
get nervous, there's something wrong,
right.
right? Because
You
if you don't
care,
get nervous, you're not caring enough,
right?
right? If you care enough, like you were saying, even the shirt, if you care enough, then you're gonna get a little nervous. Even if
Yeah,
it's a little bit, but there's something there because it means you care about the audience or whoever you're talking with enough to get nervous a little bit, right? But having said that, after all that happened and I had graduated and everything, I got called into my high school because they were doing a program where many ex alumni came in and they were just doing some lessons for some of the kids. And so yeah, sure, I'll do like a marketing something to that. But I get there and these high school students, man, yeah, like that you go back, but also you have to be on your feet
they will eat you
because
alive.
yes, you have to be
They will.
very careful. You have to be
Hmm.
mindful of like who's gonna start because you
Hmm.
know how it was back then. And so
Oh yeah,
yeah, at that point, I remember like even going back after doing performances in front of thousands of people, it used that was tough. Just in your mind, right? It turned out really nice, but I relate.
definitely, definitely. Yeah. I always
So
funny when I see like substitute teachers or people that are just student teaching for the first time. I just feel sorry for them because I know that those kids are going to eat them alive.
yes, yes, it's tough, but you learn
Yeah, you do.
and
Absolutely.
I so band, was it because you played an instrument or where did that come from?
Yeah, I started band in high school. So
Hmm.
usually in Texas, band starts around sixth grade, seventh grade. So I was in choir.
Hmm.
So I didn't jump into band until my sophomore year. And then I started doing really well in it, and then I majored in it in college
Oh.
and went from there. Started, and actually another reason why I really enjoyed teaching part of it was I started teaching private music lessons in college, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I was like, I really love seeing people get that aha moment. And so that's what I strive for, whether it's a podcast, a webinar, or speaking in front of people, to see people's, eyes light up, go, oh, that makes more sense. That's got to be the most gratifying thing. I mean, I got an email from a leader a couple of weeks ago that said, she was real nervous having to talk to another senior leader. This person is about to be CFO, and I think the other person was a senior leader, and she was nervous to talk to him. And she goes through what I taught her in her class. She felt stronger and more confident in being able to have like a tough conversation. I'm like, man, there's nothing better than knowing you can help people because you see them succeed. It just makes your day. So that's why I just love doing this.
That's amazing. That's one of the reasons we have this show to show people the passion behind
Yeah.
what they do in their day to day. Because some people see training companies and they just
Hmm.
think, oh, they're just gonna put on some PowerPoint, they have us go
Yeah.
through the program or whatever. Because we've all had those
Oh
experiences
yeah.
where they drop us into a training and it's horrible.
Yeah.
But but there's also fantastic training, and we had some people on that just talk about what they do, and you're like, what? You're doing that? That's so different and out of the box. And
Hmm.
like your example, I love your example about the sweater. That is a training for life, really, not just for that part of your
Yeah.
experience. The fact that you get shown that, and now it stays with you all these
Right.
years later, and you might even use it with someone who you know is going to get nervous,
I
right?
do. I
Yeah.
do. In fact, there's a group of leaders I train in Mississippi. We're finishing up 2 more months, and they have to present a topic that they just drew the topic last month, and it's either going to be to a legislative board or to their CEO or to their board of directors at their bank, and they had to come up with a 3 to 5 minute presentation. And so they're nervous. They literally said, "Can I trade with somebody? I'm going to be sick." They turned into middle school kids, but yeah, they're nervous, and so I'm going to bring up that idea of you got to be okay being nervous. In fact, I'm thinking about that sweater. I still have it. Now I can't fit into it, It was the same sweater that I met my wife, that I was wearing when I met my wife, my now wife. We met on a blind date in college, and I still have it. And of course,
Nice.
it's way too small, but it was the same sweater I wore when I learned about that. I remember to put on that it was a kind of a maroon sweater. So yeah, actually I still
Nice.
have. Can't believe I still have it.
I should frame it and do
Yeah,
like
I know, right?
the
Small frame.
nervousness exercise and just have it on
Exactly.
your so everyone asks, it's just a talking point.
Exactly. Exactly.
There is a topic that I saw in your talks, I guess,
Hmm.
or talk topics that I really liked the title of, which is coaching the burned out employee.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, it's one of the areas that doesn't get a whole lot of discussion. Um, I do part of my training is I look at different, coaching through like at a life cycle, and it's really based on if you're familiar with Ken Blanchard wrote a book called Situational Leadership or One or Two or something like that, and it talks about just leading people in different. You've got to lead people differently and coach them differently based on where they're at in their career and that's going to change. And so we talk about the new employee or that star employee or the employee that's been um, you know, uh, they've just been through training. But then you look at the one thing I wanted to add because I get a lot of requests for this. They're like, Paul, but what about that employee? And it's the employee that's burned out. The problem with them is that I put that together because that burned out employee at once was probably a star employee. And the the thing that I try to convey to my audiences is you got to be real careful when your best people turn silent because that means they've shut down. And I remember, in fact, it was my last year teaching. I shut down. I remember that. I mean, I should have been. I mean, I just remember my, my caring and all of that started coming down because I just got done. I feel like my voice wasn't heard anymore. It's time to move on. And so that burned out employee, what I teach is you got to find out the why. What is it that put out that flame? And many times I have found that that flame was put out by a leader that dismissed an idea, or maybe that was passed on a promotion, or just flat out was not able to grow. They were in that role for 20 years, 30 years. In fact, you look in the education system, it's a little scary that you've got a lot of really good educators that are burned out. And they're burned out. And I have heard many people say, I'm just riding my time till retirement. That's a dangerous mindset if you're dealing with kids. Anything or in anything, even in a relationship, if you're just riding it out until it's over with, that's not living. I love the line in Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies. He said, "You can either spend the rest of your life living or dying, or something like that." And I'm like, life's too short. So when you got that burned out employee, what I teach managers to do is sit down with them and say, "Hey, I noticed that you used to really want to do this. What has changed?" And so I teach managers how to approach that with empathy because it is so necessary. You've got employees that they're still good. They're still they can be helped. And we got to be too, you can't just give away an employee. You can't just say, you know what, if you're not going to care about this, just go on your merry way. We don't have that luxury anymore. We don't, the job market, the economy, you can't. It's like that old term, it's cheaper to keep her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You got an employee that's burned out. You got to find out the why. And what I typically do, the quick solving one technique that I teach managers to use is you take an employee that's burned out, say, look, I know you still got a lot left in the tank. I know you got this. And you have a lot to give. You've got a lot of experience. Can you help another person? And that's where I say, you know what, let's take the knowledge that you have and let's move with that. All I even ask, or I will teach managers to say, what changes would you make? I would love it if every manager found an employee that is burned out and say, Armando, if you were in my shoes, what would you want me to work on? Or what can I do to help you? I see a lot of experience in you. Typically, they will say, no one's ever asked me that before. And I get that. I heard that a lot. No one's ever asked me my thoughts. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Judge.
That's amazing. It's very powerful because
Thank you.
many people do not get asked that.
No.
They just go through it and then they deal with it on their own, which is a
Right.
separate
And they
topic.
struggle. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. And that's where the coaching comes in, is if I can teach managers on how to recognize that and how to teach empathy, how to teach noticing, hey, I see that what's going on? Is everything okay? Just to be able to stop and look at an employee that may be underperforming or burned out and say, what's the purpose behind it? And, you're not holding anyone less accountable, but you're saying, hey, something's off. What's going on? What can we do to help? When you show that you care like that, sometimes that's all it takes.
And your suggestion, I think, is a great one, where you take someone who might not be producing as they were, and they might not have the energy, but if you throw that spark in, hey, can you help this other person
Yeah.
that's struggling with this thing you're so good at? That triggers another pathway in their brain into something that now they can get excited about. And they might actually, well, we don't know, but they might actually get excited about it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
You're
of
giving them a
course.
shot.
And now they're doing this other thing. And I found something very interesting. I don't know if you've seen this too. Sometimes you might be burnt out here, but
Yeah.
as soon as you get a spark going over here,
Hmm.
your mind, your energy rises again, and so you're
Yeah.
excited about this, but then this also seeps a little bit of that energy into that other part
Yes.
of your life or of your business, and so just by consequence grow in general.
Yeah. I see that in sports. I'm a big NFL fan, Houston Texans fan here. And you notice that with anyone that they may not be good in this role. But boy, you get them into a new role, or you ask them, "Hey, where else would you like to grow?" That's another question you can ask someone who's burned out is or disengaged. What ideas do you have? Where else would you like to grow? We'd love to see you stay here. We'd love to see you grow. And they may say no, no thanks. Okay, well then you move on. But to give them that opportunity to say, "Let me share my gifts somewhere else." They may have just been burned out in that position because a lot of managers used to be frontline employees and they don't want anything to do with it anymore because that part of them was burned out. But that means there's something else over here. And I think it's so important. And here's another reason why it's important to deal with or to help that disengaged employee or that burned out employee. If you don't, you're going to have to deal with them another way. And the danger is you've got new employees that are watching. And if they see an employee that's burned out, what makes them think they're going to stick around saying, wow, if everyone here is burned out because they can't do anything else, then why would I even stick around? I have heard teachers say, I'm only going to make $200 or $300 more each year. Why would I even care? I'm like, whoa, I've heard that before.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And another thing I recently heard Gary Vaynerchuk say
Yeah.
about
Gary
leadership.
V.
Gary V, he's so good at talking about someone who's out there, right?
Mhm.
He owns these huge media businesses and he's still out there every day on all the social platforms and he's just having content everywhere. And one of the things he said, I think it was on the podcast, was you have to, before this happens, keep all your not best employees, but whoever's producing the most, your best
Mhm.
producers, your if you're just a one-man team or two-person team and you have someone that's with you, that person definitely, anyone
Yeah.
who's really important, you should not only talk to them often, but know what's going on with their life,
Oh,
what's
yeah.
what's happening in their family, what are they excited about in life,
Hmm.
what are they excited
Hmm.
about in the job, what are their ideas, like you were saying, to grow the business. Maybe they can give you some really good pointers because they might be the ones interacting with your actual customers, and they're going to know a lot more stuff than you will. And
Hmm.
so, keeping that conversation line open proactively is going to be so much more valuable down the line because it, when you get to the point that we were talking about, yes, these actions are fantastic and they will help these burnt out employees. But if you can avoid
Yeah.
getting there, it's
Proactive.
yeah, so much more time gained and the
Hmm.
potential to grow the whole company culture.
That's absolutely right. In fact, we do that little four quadrant of different people and how you should lead them. When we talk about the star employee, the one that you're like, you thank God that that person is there and you never want them to leave. But what managers end up doing is self sabotage. They end up, that best employee gets punished by more work, more responsibilities, and having to do the work of other people that are not. And then you turn a star employee into a burned out employee. And that's the danger, is that you give them, instead of rewarding them with asking them, hey, tell me about your family, what's going on, or what motivates you. What is it that really drives you? Spend more time with your star employees, and you have to spend less time with those employees that are not performing, because those performers that are employees that are not performing, they're going to either shape up or ship out, if you will. But if you've got a star employee and they're not growing and all they're doing is just saying, all right, well, I guess I got to fix the problems of so and so over there. Yeah, the burnout's going to happen big time. Or more importantly, they're going to leave.
Yeah. And that's costly. You
Uh-huh.
mentioned that earlier. It's costly in a few different ways, which we sometimes don't stop and listen. So you were saying right now, very importantly, sometimes these managers might self-sabotage and they might say, "Oh, I don't want to touch it. Just he's so good. Let's just leave it like that." But then you start to lose touch, and then you get to the point where they get to be burnt out. And if that
Right.
happens, they might leave. And if they leave, one, you're going to have a very tough time filling that spot just because
Hmm.
you need someone and finding someone is just hard in general.
Right.
Two, whatever you get, you're going to have to train and onboard, and that's going to
Hmm.
take a while. And then that burnt out person who you thought was done their final days is going to get a renewed energy with your competitor
Yeah.
and be a star employee over there. And now you have to fight against that too. So
You know, and here's another aspect of that cost you were talking about. Do you know the cost of replacing an employee? The average that Sherm quotes,
what is it?
150% of someone's salary. That's the industry average. And I think I've read that it's 200% if it's a senior executive.
Makes sense.
Then, another thing too, let's say that star employee you're talking about, they leave. Guess who you're stuck with? You're stuck with all the people that won't leave, right?
Hmm.
Because you're dealing with that problem, but the people that are solution oriented and want to help, they're going to say, you know what, I'm going elsewhere. That also brings up another point, which is I put on here cost of turnover, but I get a lot of times people say, well, Paul, why do you charge so much for training? How come you're charging me X amount per day? And all I do is ask them, it's like, how much does an average manager make? And how important is it that that manager is given the tools they need? Because you've got a manager. That's why I love management training so much, because it can impact an entire department or an organization. You've got one manager that you give them the tools to coach, to lead, to motivate. You're increasing performance. And my task is to help the CFOs, the people that signed the checks and said, are we going to spend this money or not, to realize that it's more valuable to just keep. I mean, think about the impact one manager, let's say you have 10 managers, one of them becomes a star manager, the impact it's going to have on their team and how much revenue that's going to bring in and productivity. So it's amazing the impact that a good leader can have on an organization. It is just, we see it all the time. You think back to think about a good manager that you've had back in your past and the impact they've made on your life, or teacher you've had in school.
It's the numbers matter.
Yeah. Oh,
We
yeah.
many times we don't stop and think like the 150% or 200%. There are actual stats. Listeners can look up this information, especially now with all the
Yep.
LLMs.
Yep.
You go on Perplexity and get it to research what the numbers are. They are impressive. The amount of additional revenue one employee can bring a company is is impressive in just as a standard average. And so when you tie that to good managers and have a good performing team, the numbers add up. And so, like you were saying, oh, the cost of training. Yes, the cost of training, but what is it giving you in return? It doesn't, it's peanuts at the end of the day for what you're doing, of course.
Right. I will put a caveat to that. It's the cost of poor training. I have sat, you just said it before. Remember you said how, sometimes you sit through a training or something like that and it's just like, please let it end. And if you'll notice, actually, when I teach, I do not use, for the most part, if it's online, on-site training, I do not use a PowerPoint. I don't want them, no, that's because I want to, let's get a flip chart. Give me a flip chart and a whiteboard. Dude, I am down because it gets them interactive. So I think the problem with a lot of leadership training, the problem that a lot of organizations say, no, that's too expensive, is that they've tried it in the past and it hasn't worked out because it was like, wow, we spent all this money and they end up leaving or it just doesn't have the results. And that's the problem is that they do this training, think it's going to fix something and it doesn't. That's, talk about behind the scenes of training. Training is not the answer. And I think Keith said that, or one of your podcasts. Someone said, training is not the end all be all. It's a part of it. But that's why I teach coaching skills because that manager is going to be with that employee daily. That's where the education, that's where the magic happens. It's not with a training class. It's does that manager have what they need on a daily basis to support what they were trained on? And I think that's the missing piece. And that's why I think a lot of organizations say, you know what, we don't want any training, it's too expensive. Well, yeah, it's too expensive. It's not worth it if you're not going to do anything with it. It's just like buying a gym membership. It's not, of course, I'm with my Bluebell ice cream coffee mug, but it's like you gotta spend the time. It's the daily things.
That's an amazing mug. I have to call out that.
Man, that's awesome.
I've
That's my
never
favorite,
seen
man. My
that coffee
favorite.
mug. That's so
Actually,
cool.
there was a client I went to. It was there in Somerville, Texas, or
Hmm.
I think it was there. But we're driving through, and I saw the Bluebell. And if your listeners have not had Bluebell ice cream, dude, you got to. But there actually is a gift shop in this Bluebell Creamery up there here in Texas, and yeah, I went. That was let's just say it was a required stop.
Where is it?
Oh, it's in Brenham. Bluebell Creamery's in Brenham,
Oh, okay.
and I was driving right through there, and it said Bluebell Creamery's, and I
Hmm.
pulled over and I went to the gift shop, and yeah, got a mug. It was way too expensive, but man,
Of
I'm
course.
I'm brand loyal, man.
Yeah, well, it's like Bucky's. You have to stop.
Yeah, yeah, you just got to.
Rahul, and I'm glad you listened to the show. Thank you for that. He said something that stuck to me, and I think we did a social post on that as well. That it's not training, like you were just saying. People know that they have to stop at a stop sign. That's
Yeah,
one of the examples he said. So if they ran a stop sign and the police officer told them to go get training, that's not the solution. They
right.
know they have to stop at the
Yeah.
stop sign.
We went through training in 16 in driver's ed. We know that.
So that's not always the solution. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you bring it up. It has to be good training where people are actually involved and you're actually doing it like you very well said it at the beginning. You like that aha moment. You
Hmm.
as a trainer like to see where that person sees the difference. It's now a different person because now they understand. And so that's what we as trainers have to strive for, not to just give you content. I mean, there's books about everything. And now with
Yeah.
all the chat GPTs and perplexities and Claudes and whatever, you can get all the information you want immediately. But is it presented to you in a way where you're going to get that aha moment? And that's what we
Right.
as trainers, and everyone as trainers or mentors or coaches have to practice
Yeah.
so that if we do sell a training, if we want people to actually like it and give us good reviews about it, then you have to make sure you are thinking about the outcome, how that person is going to grow, and not just you selling the course.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation?
No, I'm not. Please.
Okay. So and this is where I think a lot of trainers miss this is, we call them smile sheets. You get at the end of the day, you're like, hey, I want to know how I did. Did they like me? Was I funny? Did I help them? And we call them smile sheets because the trainer will read the surveys and say, wow, that was awesome. It just feeds your ego, right? But then there's that was level one. Level two is, did they learn? And so that's like a test. So level two evaluation is, can they actually write down what you're supposed to do at a stop sign, right? Level three is, are they actually doing the job? So you can measure. See, this is what makes training effective. Is like level three is, did they, are you finding that stop signs, you've got a camera on that stop sign, for example. Are the number of people running through stop signs going down? Well, now you're changing behavior. Now you're still not seeing any results from it from a financial standpoint. It's when you get to what we call a level four, which is business results. Are there less accidents? Are we saving more lives? Are people spending less in tickets? And the same thing with training, with leadership training. That's another thing. You spend money on this training, but if there's no ROI, why would a leader sign up for it? They're like, well, we just spent 20, 30, 40 grand having this guy come in once or twice or three times a year, and we just poured the money away into the toilet. But if you can say, we actually improved profits, that speaks to the organization. And we as trainers have to do that. We have to say, this is going to save you money, but we have to be able to show it. So like I've got a bank in the Rio Grande Valley, actually, I'm working with, and they talked about how they, through some of the sales training, this one gentleman said that he closed I think a 5 million or 500, it was a very large commercial loan, and said that they had, just by having a better conversation, that they're probably going to bring in five, or it's a five. I'm thinking 5 million, 5 million in commercial loans. And I told my stakeholder, I'm like, dude, I'm charging way too less. I'm not charging nearly enough. But it's like you start having these conversations. That is what trainers need to show. Is like, this is the value, because we know the value, but does the stakeholder know the value? And that's what we have to do, is show we can improve your bottom line. Because, and one question I think a lot of people, I should start asking more is, how much have you had to spend in turnover last year? I need to start asking that question now that I'm thinking about it. How much did you spend on hiring new employees last year? How much did you have to spend on training last year? All right, well, what if we can reduce it by X amount? Would that be valuable? And then you move on from there. But I think we as trainers, we get stuck in the, hey, training is awesome, we think it's valuable, but you don't show yeah, but how does it impact our bottom line?
Yes, so true. And if we transition into the sales part of it,
Yeah.
you you have the same thing going on where even that difference of conversation that you just talked about, it might have been the same conversation, but slightly varied, and now that brought in 5 million, right? Or whatever amount in revenue. And that's one part of it, which we can get into. And the other part of it is just what you just said about turnover, but in sales. Because if you have the conversation properly at the beginning, let's say we go back a little bit and you were having these conversations and people were buying, registering, etc. But you sort of pressured them into a sale.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then they go away eventually. They just get one of your products. They didn't feel comfortable. They leave. So you have that churn. And so
Mm-hmm.
your customer lifetime value is low. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's whatever it was. It was a nice sale. Hooray for that employee, but that's basically it.
Right.
But
Right.
if you have a very good conversation from the beginning where
Mm-hmm.
they are completely on board with what they're gonna get and how it's gonna
Yeah.
be delivered, etc., then they're gonna get that product, and then they're gonna get another product, and then they're gonna get another product for their wife, and then they're gonna say, "Hey, friend, this is the
Right.
bank you have to go to," and then they're gonna tell their colleagues, etc. And now your customer lifetime value and affiliate value just grew
Mm-hmm.
tremendously just by doing correct selling,
Right.
right?
And but see, you gotta come across as someone who wants to help them, not someone who wants to sell them something. And that's the thing too. A lot of, like, I look up training companies, and I'm like, what is the feeling that I'm getting? Am I feeling that pressure, or am I feeling like, wow, this person actually wants to help me? And I've got to come across as, hey, let's fix a problem that you're having. So you got to know the problem that they're going through, and then, okay, not only how can we solve it, but how can I be a part of the solution? And I want that organization to take the ownership of the solution as well. I'm a part of it, but I can't be there every day. So they have to feel like I'm someone that they can reach out to at any time, and that I'm going to be there to help them solve problems. That's why a lot of times the training I do is not just a 1 day training. It's okay, once a month we're going to get on a call. Once a month or some often we're going to check in, and I'm going to be checking in with these folks and saying, all right, how's it going so far? Because if they see it as just like a band-aid on something, then yeah, you're right. It was nice. We had a little bit of lift, but we moved on. No, you got to be involved. It's like a relationship. You're in, right? You can't just one time work with them. You got to stay, you got to show that, hey, look, I'm going to be with you the whole step of the way.
Yeah. Very important. How do you tell someone or show someone or train someone to sell without selling?
Oh my God. Yeah. I say, in fact, I'm coming up with, I've got a book that I'm putting together. It's called the S word, sales. It's like, the perception. And I don't want to bash every used car salesman, but I will bash a lot of used car salesmen that I've ever had the unpleasure of dealing with. Is you got that image of, I'm just trying to, what's it going to take to get you into a car today? It's that pushiness. And unfortunately in banking, Wells Fargo had a hard time. There's a lot of large banks that have these huge sales goals, these sales quotas, and it just puts this pressure on you. And people in banking, their mindset is, I just want to take care of customers. And so the way I teach it is, first of all, don't focus on the sales. Stop doing that. Because a lot of times they go right into the products or services. And I'm like, you got to shut up. You cannot talk about that. You got to talk about, how do I build trust with this person? Okay. So like with you and I, we both first talked, we were like, hey, we got to get to know each other first. We had several conversations, and we were like, hey, yeah, let's do this. Let's share this information. But everything starts with trust. And another thing about banking specifically, the one industry that knows everything about you, with exception of the IRS, but they know, if you go to a bank, you're going to give them your social, your driver's license, your personal information, their credit. Why in the world would I give them any of that information if I don't trust them? So if you start out with trust, building rapport, and saying, hey, look, I want to help you. And then when you do more listening, the customer does more talking. That's how you approach sales, is you don't do sales.
Nice.
That's the best way to sell, is not to sell.
So listening first,
Yeah.
that is very important. It applies for sales, but it applies for everything
Everything.
else as well, for training, for
Parenting.
parenting, for support, for everything. At the end of the
Everything.
day, the people, we as humans need to feel understood.
Yeah.
And then obviously you can't help me if you don't understand me anyway.
Right.
And there's, I find it funny. I used to do, uh, well, people know me because of the computer side, right? And so a lot of people would call me friends, family, or whatever, a long time ago, about, oh, I have this issue, right, with something technical, technological, or whatever you want to call it. And I always ask. So I just start asking very specific questions. Did you do this? Did you do this other thing? What did you do next? And most of the time, people try to rush ahead. Yes, but it's not working. And I'm like, let's
Right.
let's just talk about it. And so we go through what things they actually did, and then we figure out, oh, that's the issue. And so just asking or just listening,
Mm-hmm.
it it gives you so much more insight instead of trying to assume you know the answer,
Right.
and which you might know the answer because of intuition or experience, but it's better even in that scenario to have the patience and actually take the time to listen so that you can actually provide a good solution that will help them.
Yeah, I think in IT specifically, I think it's funny you said that. Is for me, hey, I've got this problem with my computer. Is a lot of times you'll have someone in IT say, well, did you try this or that? You got to be careful with that, because it sounds like you're mansplaining a little bit.
I know.
And so Did you try to reboot? And I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
man, you want to make someone upset, sit there and go, dude, don't do that. In fact, if I could teach IT anything, it would start off with the basic sales question, which is, tell me what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or what have you tried? Anyone that is in the business of solving a problem, start with that. With the same thing with sales. Don't go into a solution because you don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Start with what have you tried?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like in that case, you've got someone calling you saying, hey, my computer's not working. Well, what have you tried? And then, based on the information, you can say, well, here's the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And you never had to ask anything. You just sit there and said, tell me what's going on. What have you tried? Then it actually makes you spend less time because you don't have to hunt and peck anymore. You can say, based on what you told me, let's try this.
That's a great way to frame it. So anyone who's doing any sort of support work, listen
Anything.
to Paul's example here. That suggestion of just asking what's going on or what have you tried
Yeah.
specifically, I think that's a great way to handle it because it happened to all of us where we call in and we get the call center, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
definitely know it's not A, B, C, or D by this point, right? With
Yeah.
your internet or whatever, but you call in and they're always gonna do the questioning,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, I know it returned all that, right? And
Exactly.
as a customer, you get frustrated. But maybe, like you're saying, that way of asking the question, what have you tried? Then okay, yeah, so I did this, and then they can proceed to do the triage and
Yeah,
figure out
exactly.
what's
And see,
going on.
and that's the thing that irritates me is that, if you come across as trying to solve a problem too quickly, you come across as not listening and not caring. And a lot of, especially if you've got customers or you got people that are upset about something,
Mhm.
well, if you're going to come across as trying to not listen to them, that's just going to escalate things. And
Mhm.
another thing, you got to come across as one thing I teach in my classes are, it's you and me. It's first of all, it's never about what it's about. If they're yelling at you, so anyone, if you're in a business where you've got someone yelling at you, please understand a lot of times it's not you. It may be, but it may not be. So you got to just, sometimes people just need to vet. But also, it's never about what it's about, is something I always say. And also, come across it as, look, it's you and me versus that problem, not me versus you. Let's work together. And that's another thing I teach is let's see what we can do is a valuable statement to say, let me see what I can do to help you instead of, well, we can't do that because it's our policy. Man, I tell people that's the P word. Do not say policy. Anyone in any industry, it's our policy that we do da da da. I'm like, nope. And that's your new employee's go-to check down is, oh, it's our policy. I can't do anything about it. That's my pet peeve of customer service is, ugh, yes, you can. Let me see what I can do, or let me
Mhm.
see what we can do to help you is gold. You might not be able to do anything. Armando, I'm so sorry you're having that. Hey, tell me, what have you tried? Da, da, da. Okay, let's see what we can do to help you. I mean, what conflict is there? Nothing.
That is fantastic advice, Paul. I
Thanks.
I was gonna ask you, can you give some advice as we're
There you
wrapping
go.
up? But that is
Yeah.
solid gold advice. And the way you framed it, listeners, just rewind 15
Yeah.
seconds to hear that because it is so different as a customer or as a
Hmm.
someone who's receiving feedback, whatever. Just having it framed like that, you feel like, oh, cool, they care about me.
Yeah.
Let's continue the conversation. There's
Yeah.
no conflict.
Right.
So that is amazing, amazing advice.
I think people in general, it's like we put up barriers that don't need to be there. It's like sometimes we're starting a fight just to start a fight. Like, why? Why are you trying to make something worse when you can just say, look, I get it. That sucks. Empathize. My God. Oh, do you know the book? Gosh, it's Chris Voss.
Oh yeah,
Never Split
yeah.
the
Never split the
Difference.
difference, of course.
Dude, I've got a copy of it right here, man. Anyone, if you have not read it, you need to read it. You need to read it. It has this, he mentions this thing called tactical empathy and it's gold, man. It's like, you're frustrated. All you do is just say what they're dealing. It's like, you're not agreeing with them. So whether it's service, sales, leadership, marriage, kids, date night, whatever it is, taxes, man, I know that's got to be rough. Let's see what we can do to help you. I mean, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah. And man, Paul, you've even put in a book recommendation at the
Hey,
end. That is amazing. So
one of my
everyone,
favorites.
if you haven't read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, great book. You could listen to the audiobook as well.
Yeah.
Paul, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with
Thanks, man.
you.
You too. I've learned a lot.
If we can have another conversation sometime about
Hmm.
other topics that we were talking about offline, be happy
Yeah.
to. And if people want to find you, and of course your upcoming book,
Yep.
where can they reach you?
Call me. Go to my website, paulnunntraining.com. Nothing fancy, nothing brilliantly thought up. It's what was available. So paulnunntraining.com. I'll give you my cell number, 281-923-0106. Blow up my phone, but if you're a scammer, I'm going to put you on the report as junk. But definitely, if you want to talk and learn more, I'm glad to help.
Awesome, Paul. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll put the link there on the show notes so
Thank you,
people can
Armando.
find you and on LinkedIn as well. And hope to talk again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, me too. Thank you to everyone, and Armando. Appreciate what you're doing for your audience. I've started catching up on a lot of your webinar on your podcast. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.